United States is not possible while Washington continues to back Israel, maintain military bases and interfere in the Middle East. Speaking in Tehran, the Iranian supreme leader dismissed recent US overtures for dialogue. Let's take a listen in to his statements.
آمریکایی‌ها میگن گاهی البته همیشه نه گاهی میگن مایلیم با ایران همکاری کنیم همکاری با ایران با همکاری و کمک به رژیم صهیونی ملعون سازگار نیست با این وضع همراهی با ایران معنی نداره قابل قبول نیست بله اگر چنانچه به کلی پشتیبانی از رژیم صهیونیستی رو کنار بگذاره.
Now his comments come as President Donald Trump says Washington is still open to a deal with Tehran, quote, when it's ready. The two sides have held 5 rounds of nuclear talks, but progress stalled after a 12-day conflict between Iran and Israel in June. Disagreements over uranium enrichment remain a key sticking point in the relationship. We are now joined by Mohammed Osman. He's an international relations expert and he joins us live from Cairo. Thank you very much, Mohammed, for joining us. It's always a pleasure to have you here on the program. Now, the United States' relationship with Iran is long and complicated. Since the Iranian Revolution of 1979, things have been tumultuous to say the least. However, under Donald Trump 2.0, where we've seen nuclear bases bombed, we've seen a huge alliance to Israel, of course, the Trump administration. Is a Washington-Tehran relationship ever going to be possible in at least this Trump 2.0 administration, and what would it be like? What would it look like?
Thank you for having me, Thomas. Always a pleasure to be with you. Welcome back. It doesn't seem that I cannot really imagine the United States being able to maintain a working relationship with Iran at this point, given that with the recent history in hindsight, you just mentioned the 12-day war that Israel launched against Iran, and in the closing day of the war, the United States joined in destroying the nuclear underground facilities at Fordow, Natanz, and Esfahan. And basically, this happened in the midst of a negotiation between the United States and Iran. So we can understand why Iran has a lot of trust issues with the United States, because in the midst of a negotiating process that was reportedly moving positively, according to Steve Witkoff, according to Abbas Araghchi, the Iranian Minister of Foreign Affairs, and yet we were surprised by Israel launching a preemptive act of aggression against Iran, of course this came in violation of international law, and definitely did sabotage all the diplomatic endeavors to find a political solution to the Iran nuclear issue. So now, as things stand, the United States, it seems, seeks to reopen the door for dialogue and try to push Iran once more to go for a deal. However, the United States still maintains the same conditions. It insists on zero enrichment and basically the de-assembly of the Iranian nuclear program effectively. And of course, this is something that Iran will never concede to for understandable reasons, because they're not getting anything in return. If anything, they are being subjected to some sort of blackmail and pressure. I am no fan of the Iranian regime. However, I do understand why they would be very reluctant to engage in dialogue with the United States right now, because they do not really trust that the U.S. is sincere about it. The last time the United States did this, it was a cover basically for a war against Iran. And probably this time it might be the same, at least in the psyche and in the inner mind of the Iranian decision makers. However, also it would be rather foolhardy to completely reject all the U.S. overtures. With what we've heard from the Ayatollah today, the supreme leader of Iran, it'll be very dangerous just to slam the Americans and completely dismiss them and dismiss their overtures for talks, because now you will give the Americans and the Israelis all the necessary pretexts in order to carry out another war against Iran, which Israel, by the way, is itching to do. Israel feels that it was not allowed to finish the job last time, that the regime in Iran sustained substantial damage, and the Iranian military and state did sustain substantial damage. And had the war gone on, at least according to the Israeli imagination or calculations rather, the regime would have fallen. Of course, this course of thinking is questionable and up for debates, and one can argue against Israel's logic all day. However, that's what they believe, and what they believe is what matters, because this is what may lead to another war. So things are looking really bad with regards to Iran in this region, Thomas.
Indeed, and Mohammed, of course, you cite lack of trust there. Of course, a huge problem between Washington and Tehran. However, there is growing ties emerging, and that's Iran's growing ties with Russia and China. Is Tehran's foreign policy now moving beyond resistance and towards a new strategic bloc opposed to Western influence?
They have always been in that bloc, if we even can call that a bloc. It is rather a loose friendship or camaraderie, basically, between a few states or many states even that do not agree with the United States unilateral policies when it comes to international relations and even international commerce, with what's going on with Trump right now. So several countries do attempt to find alternatives, but can we speak of an actual axis and actual alliance between Iran, Russia, and China? I think that's a gross overstatement, if you ask me, because there is no treaty of alliance between those countries. And when Israel was pummeling Iran a few months ago, Beijing and Moscow were nowhere to be found. They were missing in action. They condemned Israel, definitely, that they did. And that's about it. Maybe now they are helping the Iranians refurbish their military capabilities, restock their missile stockpiles and anti-air defense rocket stockpiles. However, I cannot really imagine Russia or China going to war over Iran. And even though they did stand by Iran in this E3 fiasco, when the Europeans decided to reactivate the snapback mechanism, which is basically to the detriment of the entire diplomatic process, as well, they stood by the Iranians. However, I do not see anything beyond these symbolic acts of solidarity. Maybe this time, if another confrontation happens, they will be more serious about supplying Iran with more weapons. However, nothing will save Iran, nothing short of an actual intervention by those countries in the case of a conflict. And then we're talking about World War III, which is not going to happen.
Mohammed Osman, thank you very much. Always